Hi, everybody, and welcome to our webinar today, brought to you in partnership with Shelley Flett, one of our amazing partners here at Auscontact. I'm really excited about the topic today, adopting a mindset of curiosity, and for me, the opportunities that this presents in your everyday life. I think it's a great topic to explore. In the spirit of reconciliation, Auscontact acknowledges the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea, and community. We pay our respects to their elders past and present and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples here today. Today's webinar will run for approximately 60 minutes, and during that time, Shelley's going to take us through a presentation and share some great insights around that mindset of curiosity and the value that can actually bring, whether it's in your work, your home, your relationships, all of it, and the power that being present and curiosity can actually build. We hope the session provides you with some interesting insights and gives you the opportunity to do something a bit different or think about things a bit differently in whatever application you can apply it to. To round off the session, we'll have Q&A. So Shelley's going to talk for a bit. You're happy to ask questions as we go through. If they're relevant to the components that Shelley's actually covering, I'll step in and ask them. Otherwise, we'll keep them for the end of the session where we do have that Q&A. But if you're anything like me, it's much better if I write the question when I think of it, because it'll be the best question and I'll then forget it. So make sure you keep track by doing that. So I'm Fran Southwood. I'm the CEO of Auscontact and I'm your moderator for today. We'll run through just some general housekeeping. Like any session, maximizing your benefits comes through interaction. So if you've got stuff you want to ask or comments you want to make sure you use the chat or the Q&A feature. If you've got a question, some chances are someone else also has the same questions. So don't be afraid to do it. You're all experts on virtual platforms now, so take advantage of that. If you have any issues with sound or other tech components, just use the raise hand feature. And one of the team will jump in and have a chat. Otherwise, you can revert to the email you got with your registration, which does actually have a link that you can dial in. So without anything further, I'm going to introduce you to the wonderful Shelley Flett. Shelley does a lot of work with Auscontact. She's been an amazing partner with us and really supportive, not just of the contact center industry, but more broadly, committed to building leadership strengths and capability right across, regardless of vertical. Shelley, can't wait for the session. I'm going to hand over to you to tell everybody a little bit more about you and the session today.
Thanks, Fran. And thank you everyone for taking time out of your day to join this conversation. A webinar in adopting a mindset of curiosity is interesting because I like to interact and part of being curious is about asking questions. So definitely encourage those questions to come through. I am going to share just some of my thoughts and my thoughts come from the experience that I've had working with leaders and supporting teams across a lot of different industries over the past 10 years. And really just making some connections and observations. So what I'm sharing with you today is not the only way that we can approach a mindset of curiosity, but hopefully just will inspire some thinking and maybe challenge some approaches that you have and give you some tools at the end to be able to go and apply to your own life and your workplace. So I do work a lot with leaders, but the webinar today is about you as people more broadly as part of Customer Service Week. It's not just about leadership, but it's very much relevant to leaders and individuals alike. So if we kind of think about, this mindset of curiosity, and looking at needs and wants. So what I've noticed is that life is made up of a whole bunch of wants and needs. To what end, though? We are so focused on what is next and that immediate gratification or immediate validation and wanting and more and more and more and more. And often we forget about what it is that we need. We forget about what we need for ourselves. We forget about what we need for our people. And sometimes we only think about needs as opposed to wants. So I want to put some wants and needs ideas sort of out there. So if we think about what most of us want, I know that I want to live a long and healthy life. I want to live a life that is successful. I want to live a life that is fulfilling. I want to live a life that allows me to be the best person that I possibly can. There are a lot of people who want to live a long and healthy life. I think most people sort of aspire to that. You would, if we're going on Netflix trends, the ones that pop up, the recommended docuseries that continued to pop up for me was Life to 100. And I gave into the recommendation and started watching it a couple of months ago. It was really interesting about what we found. Or what the series talks about. So living a long and healthy life isn't just about looking after our well-being and our diet and, the amount of sleep we get and what we're putting into our bodies. I know that the supplement industry in America is worth, I think it's about $60 billion. That was in 2021. I think they're projecting that the supplement industry is going to be worth about 128 billion by 2028. So a lot of money goes into let's live long and healthy. But the thing that is often missing, and it's probably because we haven't monetized it, is this need to have deep and fulfilling connections. And when I say we haven't monetized it, that's kind of what Netflix did with Life to 100. So I guess we are starting down that way. But I don't think it's anything compared to the amount we spend on supplements. And so we think about what it is that we need to live that long, fulfilling life. And connection comes up in a lot of different research cases. So with Life to 100, there's research where they explore blue zones, which are areas across the world which have an interestingly large number of people who live beyond 100 years old. And what they found that they all had in common was this need for connection, community, family, building those really strong, trusting relationships. And so you look at that and consider that within your own life, and you go, well, what does connection look like for me in my life? I know that I need to have deep, fulfilling connections in order to live a long and healthy life. But what else is there about that? And so what we find is one of the things that gets in the way of deep, fulfilling connection is this want to trust, that we want to trust people before we focus on being trusted. And we will often forsake connection because we don't have a level of trust. And we might write people off really quickly because we haven't developed that level of trust. But there's a really important part about trust that is worth considering. So if you want to trust and you want to have trust, then what you need is intimacy. And I giggle a little bit when I say this because intimacy isn't something that's usually connected with the workplace. It's usually connected with the bedroom, and that's fine. But if we were to pop it into the workplace and look at intimate connections and what that actually means for us. And I want to kind of take you on a little bit of a side journey here around trust and how intimacy fits into things. If we think about ourselves first and acknowledging that how we engage with the world is from our own perspective, and we kind of live our own lives in bubbles as such. And I'll explain a little bit more about that in a moment. But if we look at trust, and this is based on the model from The Trusted Advisor by David Meister, Robert Galford, and Charles Green, trust is made up of two components. It's about trusting. So it's about that vulnerability to let go of things and put my faith or trust in someone else to do what I need or offer what I need or be there when I need. And that is matched alongside trustworthiness. And so trustworthiness is how I decide whether I am going to trust someone. And of course, trustworthiness is what we look for in other people, but trustworthiness is also what people look for in us. So in order to trust, sometimes we need to be trusted for that person to be able to show their true selves. And so if we think about trust again not just in isolation within our own life, within our own bubble, if I can use that term, but that we look at it more broadly. Understanding the elements of trustworthiness can be really helpful for us to explore. So I want to take you through the trustworthiness equation, which comes off the back of this. So trustworthiness is credibility plus reliability plus intimacy over self-orientation. So if we break that down, credibility is our experience, our qualifications, our confidence in what we know and what we're capable of. And so credibility comes from sharing, but it also comes from demonstrating. Reliability follows on from that. That is, can I be relied on, or can I rely on someone else to do what it is they say they're going to do, to be there when I need them, to provide the support that they have committed to doing. And so reliability and credibility are really interdependent. You sort of can't have one without the other. Credibility, if you like, is a lot about what you say. Reliability is what you do. So you've got that, am I seeing and hearing and then experiencing all of the things that I expect? And I think we get that. I think that as people in the workplace, whether you're a leader or an individual contributor, I think we get this concept around credibility and reliability. But I think we then move to this intimacy part. And I hope we're not still calling it fluff or the soft stuff. Because intimacy is hard. Intimacy isn't as easy as what we make it out to be or what we expect it to be. Intimacy requires us to get to know people on a different level. And I'm going to come back to intimacy. Fran, do you want to jump in?
No, I was just going to say, I think, that conceptually, when we talk about the fluff or the soft skills, like I've always hated the fact that we even call them soft, but I think we are seeing real growth beyond, people saying it's all the fluffy and the fluffy stuff that matters. I think we're seeing a transition out of that, which is fantastic. But I also think we've almost got this paralysis then about, well, what does that actually mean and how does it translate in a work sense? So I think people are taking the step, but I don't know that they're quite, but what does it all mean, Freddie? What does that mean I need to do and how do I need to think and approach things differently? I think conceptually they love the idea of, I need to understand my people more. I need to open myself to that trust and trusting. How does it happen? So,
Yeah, and I think it's a really good question and one that I do get asked a little bit around how do I draw out from people? So how do I start that conversation? I think this is where curiosity really comes into play, is I can't teach anyone to do curiosity well, but I can teach people to be curious. And I think when we can connect into being curious as opposed to doing curious, there's a bit of a natural no, I mean, we're born curious.
yeah.
So it's that thing that it's almost this thing we have to reawaken that has always been within ourselves.
I think there's also another part to it, Shelley, because I think you're right, right? Everybody is born curious. We, think about kids and how they drive us crazy when all they do is ask us why. But we kind of have it drummed out of us. And when you talk about teaching somebody something, and so, that comment you just made about you can't teach them, some of this, you can teach them why it matters and how to go about it. But there's so many different elements that contribute to how and what you need to adjust in your approach anyway, depending on the circumstances. And quite often it's a bit like if you think of the contact center environment, there's always that pesky thing called a customer, right? That means our approach needs to constantly change. It's the same as leaders. Our people are so different and what they bring with them, their lived experience, their everything is so different. And some of this is about that resilience and doggedness with actually knowing the end game is worth the investment. Because, again, you don't know the experience that leads to people's openness to this. So you need to be prepared to really continue to push on,
Mm.
building that trust and demonstrating trustworthiness as well as a leader.
And Absolutely. And I think there's this piece around, can I continue to come back to what is really important within myself and acknowledging, if we go back to longevity and what actually creates healthy workplaces or health and well-being, mental health in particular, is that coming back to connection. But am I connected with myself? Am I connected with myself enough for, if we think about the trustworthiness equation, for self-orientation not to override the need for credibility, reliability, and intimacy? Because so easily it can become a Fran show or a Shelley show where, oh, let me demonstrate how I'm credible, how I'm reliable, and how, this is all the stuff you need to know about me, and this is what I believe about you, as opposed to um, how much of myself do I share in order to demonstrate credibility? Reliability generally comes through action, so that's not so bad. But then how much do I share of myself to create the intimacy with someone else? Because often we have to go there first before,
Okay.
before others will meet us. But I think what we do is we put too much on. It's like we want to sprinkle a little bit of salt on our dish, but the lid comes off and we end up with a plate of salt.
I love that. Well, it's either one or the other, right? It's either no salt or all salt. And we've got some great comments happening in the chat here that from Jason and Nicola, just again kind of reaffirming the value of that intimacy and that curiosity component. But yeah, I actually like your salt analogy. Um, because far too often, and again, how far is too far will also depend on either the environment or the person that you're actually trying to connect with. And again, their level of cringe with what they see as authentic versus is this tick a box type,
Mm,
you're my leader, if it's in a work sense, and you're just doing this through rote. So again, it's this muscle that we need to continue to flex and build to make it so it's genuine for you and actually received with that true, genuine from the same, from that place of genuineness,
mm,
um,
yeah.
to actually make it value.
Yep. And I think we have to acknowledge our ego and how that kind of fits into things. And we need to acknowledge, I like the Eckhart Tolle talks about this, is when we are being driven by the ego, what we feel compelled to do is put ourselves above or below someone else. And for us to be truly connected, we need to place ourselves at the same level as the people around us. And to do that, we need to set the ego aside. We need to let go of our ego, and we need to be okay with the fact that you and I are both human beings and we both feel, and we've both got the ability to be as curious as one another if we are open to that and if we're willing to explore. And that is a pretty scary thing for some people, because it is. And I think one of the things that stops us from being curious about others is that we don't dare even ask ourselves the questions. And
Yeah.
so, if we're going to be more curious, then I think we've got to start with, what does that look like for me? So if I know that to be trustworthy, I need to have that intimacy with other people. But if I want intimacy with other people, I really need to understand what that looks like for me. And be okay with what comes up and have access to the resources and the support that can help us get through that.
I used to always say to my leaders in different roles that, step one, you need to know yourself. Step two, you need to know your people and bring it together and understand your impact, because those three together actually help you then shift and flex and adjust a little bit to recognize what others bring to that conversation or to that relationship.
Mm,
But you're right, you've got to be open to kind of continually challenge your thinking. And for a lot of people, we can all say leave your ego at the door, but for some people it's really hard, particularly where their whole venture is based on validation and, constant, kind of recognition of contributions. And again, if you're trying to build a relationship with them, sometimes you've got to actually also accept that that's what they need. So there
yeah.
are, this give and take. There are those elements to it that you also need to be really cognizant of in real time.
Mm.
And kind of be prepared to go back and try it a bit differently or try it again or yeah.
Oh, yes, there is no like I tried that and it didn't work and therefore that doesn't work for me. And any leaders on this call will know that you don't get to just say that that didn't work for me. Like that's just not who I am. I think we're constantly being challenged to go, it doesn't matter who you think you are, you have to be what your people need.
Yeah.
And so much of that is, all right, so that didn't work, let me try again. Who else can I tap into? What other resources can I pick up or build awareness around? What can I learn? What skills and how do I build that awareness of myself, but also in consciousness of the other people? And I think that's where, if we think about the bubble kind of thing, if it's the merging of the worlds, like to expect that we're not going to live our lives in our own bubble is unrealistic. We're always going to have this preference for our own perspectives and the way that we see things, but it is a recognition that that is not the only way, and we do interrelate with other people. And so to follow on from creating that trustworthiness, what we want is to be heard. What we need is to listen. And so in order to listen, I like this concept of we need to understand the levels of listening. So level 1 is ignoring completely. And I think this is funny because as someone who's worked in leadership and with leaders for a long time, this is something that I've been guilty of in the past and still do sometimes, mainly with my kids. Ignoring completely, guilty of. Pretending to listen, absolutely. Still to today kind of think that multitasking is possible and I can pretend to listen over here and do something over there, and really unsuccessfully try to do both. Selectively listening, I think selectively listening and listening to respond, I think, are really dangerous for leaders in particular. I think we place a lot of pressure on ourselves that we will have the answer for our people, and that there's nothing that we can't respond to. And if there is things that we can't respond to, then that's a reflection of our capability or our ability to lead people. And so when we can get out of our own way and we can listen and be curious by holding space, then we can transition into level 5, 6, and 7, which is listen to understand, listen to learn, and listen to connect. And it's when we can understand, learn, and connect with our people that we start to expand that intimacy. So even, if we're thinking about intimacy alone, even just moving from this space of I'm listening for me into this space of I'm listening for we will help to increase intimacy.
And sometimes, Shelley, it's interesting, number 4 there, listen to respond. I've actually heard plenty of leaders say, that's what I'm really good at. I listen to respond instead of listen to react, right? So it's this step up to pretending to listen, because that's all about reacting. But actually they think listen to respond is the landing place. And I think the opportunity to dig deeper and move more into understanding and, learn, connect, suddenly it's about pushing beyond, what people see as the standard kind of goal or area they're trying to really sort of build. I'm going to really listen, then I'm going to respond. It's actually, well, that's just part of the way, guys. So I love that under the line stuff, because it is about when you then can actually really reflect and, build your awareness and really be open to that next stage of intimacy.
Absolutely. And I hear, particularly in the contact center industry, I hear I don't have time to do 5, 6, 7. I have time to do 4. And I say, cool, that's fine. It's not that you shouldn't be able to do 4 or 3 or 4. Notice where that's not working for you, though. Notice where it is deteriorating relationships as opposed to building them. And notice where you're developing dependency on you as a leader or, as the individual. When you can understand and learn and connect, you can help, if you use that metaphor around, I can either give the person a fish and feed them for a day, or teach the person to fish and feed them for a lifetime. Level 5, 6, and 7 is all about teaching the person to be able to fish so that they can survive for a lifetime. And ultimately that's what we're wanting to do.
I would also challenge that it does not take a whole lot more time to do 5, 6, and 7 than it does to do 4. To be perfectly frank, I think time is a crutch that a whole lot of people use. It's an easy one.
Mm.
Everybody's busy. We're just all busy doing different things. So actually, it's about choice. So I would say you can comfortably, in any role, step into an understanding position as opposed to a responding position without any more time. So I call that one, let me say.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. And you know what? I think you have to trust like you have to trust that that does actually work before you, because it doesn't make sense. At the theoretical level, like in your head, you're like, I just don't understand how that makes sense. And you might think about, deep and meaningful conversations that you've had with friends or family, and they last for hours, and you've wasted a whole afternoon kind of talking about this. Yeah, that is a way, like that's one option, but you can also understand, learn, and connect in really brief moments, to your point, Fran.
And you can also do it at a deferred point, right? You can
Yeah.
actually listen and take on board and then apply some reflection and then go and explore and ask them follow up. And suddenly, actually, if you go back, power of going back as far as jumping a couple of steps in your relationship, as far as intimacy with another person, rechecking back in and actually demonstrating that you took something on board is an incredibly powerful connector.
Yeah, yeah, it really is. So let's talk about what gets in the way of us being able to listen. So, if you want to be able to listen with a we focus at that 5, 6, 7 level, you have to be present. And in order to be present, you need to improve your attention. And I have been delving into this attention space for the last couple of years. We're in the middle of an attention crisis. Our attention has been diminishing for over 100 years. So we're at the space now where I think, and this is outdated data, this is probably about 12 months old, but 12 months ago, 7-second TikTok was about the attention span that you would capture of people. I see my kids flipping through reels, and they really can't focus on any particular thing for any extended period of time. My 15-year-old son actually tells me now, because we've got that kind of relationship, Mum, I stopped listening. You can stop talking now. Now, we've had to have a lot of conversations about how he's going to struggle to build connection if he can't maintain the attention for other people. And so I look at my 15-year-old and I go, gosh, we've got problems coming up. For us as adults and mature, probably experienced adults, it's about looking at what is getting in the way of being able to hold that attention. And so there's this distractibility that we have. There is constant distractions. And what we have to do is turn the volume down on the distractions, or mute them if we can for a period of time. And so there's two types of distractions. There's a book by Benjamin Hardy. It's called Willpower Doesn't Work. It's one of my favorite books. And what he talks about is this concept between internal distractions and external distractions. And that if we want to improve our attention, we can't rely on willpower alone. Just because I want to listen to you, just because I want to connect with you, just because I want to increase or improve the intimacy that I have with you, doesn't mean it's going to miraculously happen. We have to build awareness around what is it that's getting in our way. So if we look at the internal environment, you're looking at things like lack of sleep, too many things that you have to do that are all in your head. How often do you leave work with all this stuff going on in your head, and expect that your head's just going to hold it for you nicely and neatly until you need it? It's not. It's going to get in the way. It's going to pop up at random times. You're going to go to sleep, and then either it'll wake you or it'll be the first thing that you think about when you wake up in the morning. If you're in conversations with people, you might find that it pops into your head in the middle of conversations. So internal distractions are really problematic. So noticing those, how do I get it out of my head? How do I quieten my mind? And you see, mindfulness is something that's building in popularity. It's actually really hard to be mindful. It's actually hard to develop a mindfulness practice. And a lot of mindfulness practices really focus on the breath. And I think people get a little bit bored, or they think that focusing on the breath is a little bit woo-woo. Actually, it's the hardest thing that we can ever do is to just try and focus on your breath for 30 seconds. I don't even think I can get to 30 seconds. And I've been doing a mindfulness practice for a couple of years. I think I get to probably maybe 20, 28, and then my mind goes off somewhere and I have to bring it back. So, that internal distractions are there all the time, and we have to be able to quieten our mind and be okay with that. Then we have the external distractions. They're a little bit easier to identify. They're a little bit easier to turn the volume down or press mute on. So your external distractions are your notifications is probably the biggest one. It is, it's dual screens. So how many of you right now are in a dual screen setup? I have dual screens, and I have a screen that's sitting to my right, and unfortunately, I didn't shut my emails down. So I'm not looking at it, but in my peripheral, I can see things coming in as I'm talking. And while I'm maintaining my attention in the conversation with you right now, it's still there. And so it's noticing where that's happening and shutting it down. So, turning across my screen, which I'm going to actually do right now because it is quite annoying, and minimizing my screen, and putting my phone on do not disturb, and removing that tiny, tiny little envelope icon from my desktop, which is so incredibly small, but has such a massive impact because we've been trained to see it pop up, to shut the notifications down on my apps, to turn off instant messenger. And I'm not saying do this all the time, but notice where your attention is needed and set yourself the right conditions to succeed. If you want to focus, if you want to build intimacy with other people, it's not going to happen if you're allowing yourself to be distracted. Fran, did you want to add anything to that, or?
I think both internal and external, I call it the noise regardless. And, I think that sometimes I'm guilty of this. Sometimes we use the noise, right? It's a really successful way of procrastinating as well, or intentionally not actually addressing some of those things you need to do. You know it, but actually you'll use the busyness. You'll use those external, quick, I've got an email. Well, the world's not going to stop if you don't actually look at it right now. And, sometimes we get caught up in that whole, circus, but it's quite convenient. It kind of we sit comfortably in it. So again, that perspective, or theoretically I'm busy, we're all busy, I'm so busy, I've got to do this. And it gives you your own excuse not to do some of those other things. And it takes it, to me, it's actually quite brave to be willing to step into, number one, notice the distractions. So there is a whole focus on, calling yourself out for what they are. You've got to kind of make that conscious recognition. But it's also quite a big step to then actively do something about them. So talked about minimizing screens, turning off, time boxing. We can all get caught up in the, binge Netflix. The next thing you know, the whole Sunday's disappeared and you haven't kind of done those things you wanted. Suddenly you beat yourself up for it. Then you've not helped yourself with any of the busyness for the week. So I think that there's a real two-step process to it. Number one comes from that awareness around what are they and what do they make me do? So what is the behavior that follows the distraction? Because it's all choice-based, right? I get so irritated at my daughter will be like, come on, it's 7 o'clock, let's go walk the dog. And I'm like, oh, I've got emails there. And then I think, don't be ridiculous, walk the dog. And then in the afternoon, I'll get cranky at her and she'll be like, why are you getting cranky at me when I'm saying, come on, let's go for a walk? And she's right. And I'm absolutely unreasonably, totally unjustified in being cranky at her. But that's my number one. I'm like, no, I'm distracted by my busyness. I know that's what I should be doing, getting up, going for a walk the dogs, get some fresh air, have a chat. And of course, once I do it, I love it. But actually, I hide behind the busy because I just, for whatever reason, I'll be like, no, couldn't be bothered. But actually, then got to take the steps. If you're prepared to take the to do the heavy lifting around what are the distractions, how do you react to them, you've then got to be prepared to make a call that says, and I'm now going to change. So sometimes I think it's easy not to notice and not to address because, once you know something, you kind of can't unknow it. And
Mm.
you then have to take a step knowingly, which sometimes people don't, they're not quite ready to do yet. So I think that there is yeah, I say there's some braveness with let's actually take that step and make change because change is hard, right? We see it in our work life every day.
Mm.
So, this is just another one of those applications.
And just listening to you talk about your daughter, it really does highlight the importance of connection with family or having intimate connection with someone, because it actually helps with that distractibility. If it
Yeah.
wasn't your daughter saying, come on, mom, let's go for a walk, and it was someone else, it could be easy just to ignore them, or if you don't have that depth of connection. So once it almost is it builds momentum. So being able to, excuse me, have intimate relationships where you've got that depth and you've got that trust where someone can actually say, I can see that you're in a space that you isn't helping you. I'm going to connect in with you to help you connect in with yourself and connect more broadly. Is that it definitely, it helps. It shouldn't be, your daughter shouldn't be the person that's responsible for you being more connected and being less distracted, but it definitely kind of helps. And when you can identify the distractions, both internal and external, and you can put in place some strategies, then you can build into that the connection that comes with that and be curious about what works and what doesn't work, and not expecting that you're going to, find a solution to these things that's going to be the end. So, I've been working on creating more space with myself because I love busy. Like it probably am coming out of a bit of a busyness hangover of the last couple of decades, and being able to just sit in that stillness. And I can tell you that sitting in stillness was really, really scary. I remember doing a stillness practice. I went to a friend of mine that I was working with. I was still working in the corporate environment. So it was probably in 2010 that someone said, oh, I went to this meditation session in this Buddhist temple and it was amazing. And it's just around the corner from you. And I was like, oh, love adventure, love trying new things. Let's go there. And I got there, and the whole idea, it wasn't a guided meditation practice. It was just a space to sit. And I went and I sat there, and the silence was deafening. And I think I lasted 10 minutes and I couldn't even walk out of there. The whole room was spinning. I was nauseous. I crawled out into the hallway and remained there in a ball having a panic attack, the first of my life. And the cause was that I was still and I'd just been with myself. So while I talk about this, just be still and be quiet and allow that.
It's tough. Yeah. I think it's hard. And look, I always say I'm one of those, this is my narrative. I can't meditate. Well, actually, that's rubbish. It's because I can't get into that stillness, or in fact, I allow the distractions to draw me away. So, you talked earlier about can you last the 20 seconds, the 30 seconds, the mindfulness. I continue to come back and try it with, daily meditations and stuff like that. And I've got to build myself up to it. And I need to actively change my narrative around it as opposed to just accept that that's my reality, because I'm no different to anyone else. You can still your mind. It's just that it's hard.
Mm.
So you've got to, kind of get in there. But, that whole intimacy thing, and it's interesting. I look at some of this and I think, I am a classic procrastinator. I love distractions. Any distraction I'm in for. But equally, I'll then eventually get to what it is I was meant to do. And it's amazing because I think there's another really important component in recognizing how you feel. when you've then actually done whatever it is you've either been procrastinating about, or you've been trying to do and you haven't gotten to, or you've finally built some, really strong and real connections with, whether it's your team or, family, whether it's, I went for a walk with my daughter, whether it's you're sitting at the kitchen table and everything's off and you're actually having proper dialogue and, real conversations. It could be about nothing, but it's connection. There's a real opportunity to use some awareness post that and really reflect on, how did it make me feel?
Mm.
What was it that I got from that? And actually use that as an incentive to keep challenging in some of those areas that you can get caught up in. Whether it's the scrolling or the, crazy ass TV or Candy Crush on an iPad, whatever your, distraction is, there's actually some opportunity to challenge the gratification that you get from the distraction versus your, apply your neurological brain mapping everything to say, actually, what's the difference between that and the gratification I got from doing something that was really connecting me to another person, or, and challenging you to think a bit differently about growing into, well, I'm going to do it a bit more because I felt so good afterwards. And,
Yeah.
that again requires a bit of discipline. You've got to constantly remind yourself, because we naturally go back to that default.
Absolutely. And, there is just so much that's written about the importance of creating that space into, what is it? Dopamine Nation
Yeah.
is a book that talks about the little hits that we get. And I think there was research that was done, I think it was last year or the year before, around how often we check our phones. And for majority of people, I think for 70% of people, it was once every 12 minutes, but for 40% of people, it was once every 5 minutes during waking hours. Now, you think about how long you're awake and you think about how often you are touching your phone and going to that, is that, we're distracting ourselves for that little hit all the time. And so it's not a matter of reversing it 100% and, throwing your phone away, because people have done that. And it really is like going cold turkey from, 20 years of smoking or whatever it is. You can't reform these habits straight away. So it's about creating small opportunities. And I read a lot, but there's another book called Peak Mind by Amishi Jha, and she talks about this concept of 12 minutes of mindfulness. So just 12 minutes of mindfulness each day will improve productivity and efficiency and help with your mental health and well-being, build more resilience, reduce stress. Like, there's so many benefits, and it's just 12 minutes a day. But she doesn't start with a 12-minute practice. She says start with a 1-minute practice and then build up to 2 and then 3 and increase it over time. But the key is to create a habit or a routine or a rhythm around that in order to do that. But I think, in terms of being curious, it's about asking questions. So I think we would benefit from reducing the amount of statements that we make, because statements tend to have this absolute connotation. They tend to kind of shut down curiosity, as opposed to if I was to ask a question. And so I'd love to leave our audience with a few questions that will help to go as deep as you want to go, or not. And the 3 questions that I like to ask, it's around be, do, have. So if you think be, do, have are the 3 things to remember. So if you think about a problem that you have just within yourself, and ask yourself the question, who is it that I need to be to solve my problem around this? And spend enough time, like if you've got a sheet of paper, just start to brainstorm, just write down whatever comes. So if I want to solve my problem around short attention span, first of all, is who is it that I need to be to solve my problem? Well, I need to be present. I need to be compassionate. I need to be kind to myself. I need to be supportive of myself and others? And I just continue to answer that question. And there's no right or wrong answer to the question. It's whatever comes up for you. So who is it that I need to be? Or I need to be disciplined, or I need to be rigid around when I'm going to actually have the space to be still, or whatever that is. And so the second question then builds on the first question. And the second question is, when I'm being this person, when I'm being these things, what will that then enable me to do? So when I'm being disciplined and I'm being kind and compassionate and curious, what that will allow me to do is just sit and be still. And it'll allow me to consider questions. It'll allow me to ponder different perspectives. It'll allow me to offer solutions where solutions are relevant, or offer different perspectives to other people, as opposed to coming up with the answers or providing advice, particularly non-solicited advice, which is a really big one that we do. And so then we brainstorm, we just write a list as exhaustive as we can make it around, when you're being this person, what is it that it'll enable you to do? And then the third question is, when I'm being this person and I'm able to do these things, what is it that I will have? And this is the one that we don't spend enough time on. We tend to be, do, loop. So be, do, and then be. So we be, do, we get stuck in this loop where we don't ever stop to go, what will that give me? What will I have? So when I'm being this person who's kind and compassionate and supportive and disciplined, I'm able to create the stillness, and I'm able to ask the questions and broaden perspective. And when I'm doing those things, what that will give me, what I will have at the end of it, is I will have deeper connections with people. And when I have deeper connections with people, I will feel more confident about the work that I do. I'll feel less lonely. I'll feel like I'm not in this on my own. I'll feel like I'm part of something that's bigger than myself. And so when we can reflect on what we have, we can then reinforce the be. And so they align, when we've got the be, the do, and the have that are aligned, we really do set ourselves up to solve most problems if we want to do that, but also that we can encourage other people to be who it is that they want to be. And if we come back to the beginning of the conversation where I said I can't teach you to do curious, but I can teach you to be curious, is that, relearning what we've unlearned as children, is to bring back some of that identity that helped us to be naturally curious in the moment. And that we can recognize that what it will give me today is different to the curiosity when I was a toddler and what it gave me then. But it's still so important. It's still part of my life's journey, and it's still part of what helps me to contribute to the bigger picture, whatever that is for you. And so I love these three questions because they're great to ask of other people, but they're also really good to ask of yourself. And you just need a little bit of time and a little bit of space. And this won't hopefully have you curled up in a ball because you've just tried to go from busy to silent for an hour. I love your
I
thoughts on
think
these.
no, I think Shelley, the important thing here is it's conscious, right? So if you don't step out of busyness, you just stay busy, right? And sometimes you can be blissfully unaware that there's this whole other world that you can be a part of that actually will make you feel deeper, do more, connect broader, like all of those things that you've covered off today. So I think step number one, and again, I go back to some of the neuroscience behind this. This is about consciously asking and reflecting. So, ask yourself, these three questions are fantastic. I agree with you. It makes you actually, challenge yourself if this is about, actually asking yourself the questions. Challenge yourself and be really honest. And I think you'll find as you do it again and again, it becomes then an unconscious way of thinking, right? You consider them as you go. But I think it's important not to lose sight of that deliberate action. So it actually is physically taking the time to ask the questions.
Mm.
Um, and I think that it then continues because what your answers then become are again what you are building in through your brain pathways as places you go to when you ask yourself the next question or the question the next time or something same or similar. So if you think about yourself in the workplace, and I remember probably about, I don't know, maybe 15 years ago, and I just started a bit longer than that. I just started with a really big organization, and I remember being present at the then commissioner was doing a speech. He'd been the commissioner for a really long time, super busy, leading a big organisation with 25,000 people at it. He was always upbeat. Like he was a super clever guy, but he was always upbeat. And I remember this session, and it was like a Q&A leadership panel. It was fantastic. And I think I'd been at the organisation for maybe a month, so it was just kind of random that I happened to be in Canberra and this thing was on. And someone said to him, "How do you keep focused? How do you stay engaged? How do you not snap at every person?" Because there was some crazy stuff going on at the time. And he said he finds the right space in his day to reflect. And this was in Canberra, and Canberra can get a little cold. And he said, "I always, doesn't matter about the weather, I ride my bike to work and I ride my bike home." And he said, and I ask myself three questions every afternoon on my way home. I say, what decisions did I make today? So he said, it makes me sit there and think, well, what did I? And he said, obviously I'm not going to think of every decision, but what were those big decisions I made today? And he said, so I'm recalling them and I reflect. And then he said, I asked myself, if I had more time, would I have made the same decision? And he said, so again, I'm thinking through my thought process. Was I, if I had more time, if I wasn't so rushed, if I wasn't distracted by a million things? And he said, and sometimes my answer is yes, I would have made the same decision. Sometimes my answer is absolutely not, whatever. And he said, and the last question I have to myself is, how did my decision make people feel? He said, so what I've actually done is recalled my scenario, my situation. I've thought about what I did the environment lead me to come to the conclusion or the decision that I made? And if it did, you need to get better. You need to think differently about this. He said, but the fact that I've actually reflected and I've asked myself that, it means next time something same or similar will make me think differently, because what I'll remember is my reflection, not my action. I'll remember my reflection of my action. He said, and the last one is actually the most important. How did my decision make people feel? And again, it's not that your decision's going to change necessarily, but actually your approach to your decision. So your approach to the impact on people. And he said, and that's how I then think about what are those steps I need to take? How do I need to build better and stronger connections to be understanding those impacts on people? And, I reckon I've told that story to every group of people I've led since, because to me, and I still recall it, and I remember that day thinking, oh my God, that is exactly how I need to kind of think about, whether it's every day or once a week or whatever. And I think for me, it actually allowed reflection to become a really important part of my leadership style, and always then finding the time, whether it was driving my car to the office, whether it was, out for a walk, something, I would consciously ask myself about the day. And I found that it allowed me to continue to actually, because we all say, if I'd done that job 5 years ago, if I did that today, knowing what I know, I'd be really good at that job. I always say I'd be a great team leader now.
Yeah.
But, actually, the reason you say that is because you've learned so much more and you've, grown as a person, all those things. But this for me was a conscious way of constantly looking at how do I more about my impact as a leader? How do I think more about my decision making in a way that is about building my craft and improving me? To me, this is that same concept. How do you take it to how do I be kind of the master of that moment? How do I use the information that reflection and awareness gives me to actually be better at what I do, whether it's about relationships or work, whether it's about leading, whether it's about being led. Because again, we've all had those times where we've worked in organizations where our manager is challenging. This stuff is so good to actually help you rethink that relationship and how you can, put the relationship on steroids or change its direction entirely, because it's not actually about the other person. It's always about you. And we would have all had those moments, I've had plenty of them where I was like, oh my God, this person that works for me is, terrible. They're not doing this, da 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 da. And I still remember my husband turning to me one day and saying, well, is that about him or is that about you? And I was like, oh my God, I'm rude to you. I can't believe you said that. But he was absolutely right. It was never about the other person. It was always
Absolutely.
about me and what I needed to rethink and do differently. And even when it goes against every fiber of your being to be what you thought was, not your approach or not who you are as a leader, sometimes that's actually what the other person needs. And it's got to be about what they need in that relationship as well. So I love these questions. I think they're fantastic. I'd love to hear anyone's views on them, but
Yeah. And I think what you're talking about with reflection is where transformational change will take place is through reflection, not reflection alone, but if you don't have reflection, your ability to transform, it diminishes so significantly. And so if you don't have if you're not in the right space to take up a mindfulness practice, I would say to take up a reflective practice to start with. I think that's so powerful. And I think the other thing that the questions that you've posed, which I love, as well as the ones that I've shared around the be, do, have, open up choice for us. And so they allow us to stay in control and empowered to do the things that we need to do for no other purpose than to live our best life, because that feels good.
I think that's actually a really important point, because I think it's easy to still fall into victim mode when it's like out of control, out of your control. And, we all work and operate in environments where the authorizing environment is not always about you. It often, more often than not, you've got a boss, right? So it sits somewhere else ultimately. But there is an important component or a real power in understanding what is in control. And, the parts of it you can always control is how it's going to affect you or how it's going to make you feel, and what you're going to let go and what you can let go through you, are really important things to actually recognize. And I think you're right, that mindfulness around, being able to actually actively understand, control. Because again, victim's an easy space to land. It's really comfortable. It requires absolutely zero effort because it requires effort to change how you feel about something. So victim land can be incredibly paralyzing, but you're never going to grow as a leader if you sit in victim land.
Yeah.
You've yeah.
So in terms of
Love some
curiosity,
comments if anyone's got
yeah.
anything else here. We've gone all over the place with curiosity. I love it, and I know there's been comments here from guys around, the importance of calling out, some of this hard stuff, really kind of getting there, but equally the importance of that curiosity to connect and build the relationships with your people, and the benefits will just, you won't even be able to kind of articulate the power that those benefits actually bring. You talked before about mindfulness, and I think it was the 12 minutes of mindfulness I think you started with, but the scientific research around productivity change with
Huge.
letting go of distractions, and again, there's practices you can actually adopt that others have used that are really successful that help you in those early stages. And time boxing is a really good one. Instead of going cold turkey, give yourself an hour on something, but actually then be really disciplined with, if you are the 7-second TikTok watcher, limit yourself. Watch an hour a day and that's it. But don't get caught up in the 7 hours and suddenly it's 2 a.m. in the morning and you're still on your screen. So I think there are some really cool tips and tricks that you can pick up. You've mentioned some great books, so I've actually got a couple of those. They're really good ones. But again, the opportunity that it gives in the work environment is around that opportunity to actually optimize performance. Like, distractions are the soul suckers, as far as productivity and outcomes and progress. So yeah, we love it.
Thank
Oh,
you
lots
for
here. We've got people taking notes and lots of tips, and yeah, no, it's been good. It's been a great session. I don't know if there's something you wanted to wrap up with Shelley. We love having this sort of conversation. I think it's not often one that drives a whole lot of questions in a Q&A style approach, but I think it's because it's stuff you just want to hear and really kind of take away. So I
Yeah.
think it's awesome.
I am the only thing that I would close on is it just feels so good when you can live your life with curiosity. When you can let go of judgment and you can let go of the heaviness, the fear that comes from, and it's so cool.
It is
And
cool. Love it.
fun and adventure is
It's
really
crazy. It
important.
shows your nerdy side, Shelley. All the things that, give you the buzz. I love it. Thanks everybody for coming along today. Thank you for all your comments there on the chat throughout it. But Shelley, as always, love working with you, and look forward to doing some more of these.
Thank you. Thanks
Thanks
everyone.
everybody.
Yeah.